Yes, to the path ultimately leading to a reunification. And that's what
Yeah.
I see is part and parcel of the journey.
Mm.
It's not a smart idea to tell the ego, whatever we want to call it, that it has to drop its own BS and stop doing what it's doing because it's no longer needed. Everything in life is performing a function with purpose. And so, what happens in the process, because there's a lot of what you may call, I call them nouns. That's the best way to. So we call the ego has become this thing, and it's moved out of being a living form of expression, and even better, it's moved out of being a living formed expressingness of itself. Like, let's get as long and creative and verby with it, because as soon as we put it in a box, yeah, well, then it seems that often we end up chastising it for existing, which is exactly what, if you want to have a beef with those that design trauma-based mind control, it's exactly how it's designed. So we traumatize you, you get a little ego, and then you can go and abuse your own little ego, so we don't have to do it for you anymore. And by you abusing you, then we get actually what we want. We get to go and design the next big scandemic over yonder, so that we can just repeat this cycle of endless erosion. Really, that's what's going on, erosion of our humanity. But as you also indicated, and how the truth of nature really operates, is that when you deviate for too long, it's going to come just swing back. And this is just what's happening for humanity as a whole. We are in the last 100 years, we've gone through an increase of distortions of proportions that are just out of this world. And the distortions are maybe not so much about how brutal the wars are of the past maybe 10 years compared to how they were back in 1918. No, but the insidiousness of the distortions has created more diversification of trauma based forms of manipulating and distorting human orientation. Look, the reality of it is that there is a real territory to reclaim for humanity. And I believe it's going to be in our generation, the regeneration, that that territory is going to be reclaimed. You know, there is a spiritual war going on. It's a war against life. It's a war against anything that's godly and divine and of true spiritual essence. That is what I see is happening all around, but that's nothing new. The territory and where the battleground really is, if we want to look at it through that lens, is here. It's inside of us. And for as long as the host of self, that I call the will, isn't brought back in, we are not willing. And so the beautiful thing about the will is that the will only works when we are using it. It also works when we're not using it. So if I'm willing to do something, my cells are saying, okay, well, he's willing, we're going. But if I say nothing about whether I am willing or whether I'm not willing, guess what? I'm not willing. And this is a very, and that's not so much about I'm not willing to navigate there. It's like, if I don't say I'm willing to heal, I am not willing to heal. If I don't say I'm willing to transform this life, this soul incarnation, I am willing to bring it in, I'm willing to anchor it in. If I don't say that I am willing my soul to ground and anchor into my core of my body solely, I want to unify my relationship between the ego and the soul. If I don't will that, I don't want it. I'm not willing it. And so, this part of the will that I've spoken around in many forms and many aspects has been washed out of the English language. And it's almost like it's so familiar, and yet it's hardly spoken of. But it's the definitive factor to positive change? Are you willing to make change? Because what willingness does, and this is about contract law, and the only soulful form of contract law that exists on this earth plane, is that when you're willing, you are contracting yourself and nobody else. You are contracting all of yourselves, because what the proclamation of your will is you are giving a divine ordinance and instruction to all of your being. And the beautiful thing is that you can say, okay, well, we just talked about this ego. What if this ego gets hold of the will and says, I'm willing this and I'm willing that, and I'm going to be willing this? Well, the beautiful design of our human nature is that when you are willing, after you are declaring or proclaiming your will, you have to surrender it, because you can't make shit happen anyways. That's called willpower. And willpower is a totally different thing. That's like brute force driving something to the finish line so that you get somewhere. Hey, it works. It gets you results. It gets you certain results. Willfulness comes with divine grace. That is just intrinsically part of it. Grace is what actually carries your instruction into the fabric of time and space. It is, in more precise terms, feminine grace. It's not masculine grace in the way that we have witnessed that maybe being different. It is a divine feminine gracefulness that carries a proclamation of one's will into the etheric field. And that is not a strong, piercing, penetrative form. No, it's a creational wave. And when we are willing, all of our cells, our eye cells, our brain cells, our ear cells, they all get attuned. I am willing to come into awareness, how to free myself of fill in the blank. Now the ears have received an order to pay attention. If you hear anything coming up around what the host here has willed, record it. The brain cells are aligned. So the ears, the eyes, everything has received an instruction to receive. And if we're not receiving from the external world, to bring from within the awareness up of what we already innately know, but have been maybe afraid to really own, to really look at, to really be with. Everything in the hero's journey and the return to our soulful sovereignty stands and falls with whether we are willing or not. And that's where the journey begins. And I feel for myself that when I went through my process of what I call will awakening, my directional orientation started shifting. And I gravitated out of my old life because I was for the first time able to honor my inner truth. I was able to feel my true north, and I was not able to deny it any longer. And when I did, I started wilting. I started getting into addictions. I started getting into all sorts of misbehavior, so to speak. But it was just performing a function to show me you're not honoring what your inner truth is. And there's a lot of people that are coping with not living in alignment with their inner truth, out of fear, out of trauma-based mind control. And your answer out of all of it is just become willing for a different reality, become willing to step into a new territory. And the thing is, that is most beautiful about it is that it's not a one-time will choice. It starts with that, but you continuously have to remain willing and then curious, willing and curious. And why the curiosity is because you got to surrender. You got to let yourselves know, I am willing to heal this. I don't know how to heal it, but I'm willing to come into awareness. And so there's a natural surrender that comes with that. And when that surrender happens,